The more I worked on this video, the more I started realizing maybe I'm just doing all this out of obligation and not as an actual passion project. So you know what? I decided to take a break from this video. That's why it's massively delayed. It's very clear from the original video that I was just parodying Amtrak Guy 365. I know the number. Yeah, I was just very clearly parodying him. It's just like, hell, I couldn't even say the game's name correctly. The first train of Red Death Redemption 2 is just very clear that I picked up a random game with a train in it just so that I could parody Amtrak Guy 360. So, you know what? I'm going to try and we're going to do this again. This time with all my facts straight. The first train of Red Dead Redemption was based off the Baltimore and Ohio's number 147, the Thatcher Perkins. Built by the Montclair shops in 1863, the Thatcher Perkins was invented to replace engines that were damaged or captured during the Civil War. The engine's main area of operation would be west of Harper's Ferry. After the end of the Civil War, the engine would be used as a regular passenger and goods engine and worked between Cumberland, Maryland, and Grafton, West Virginia. In 1892, the engine was eventually retired and would eventually go on to appear in the 1927 Fair of the Iron Horse. This is where the Thatcher Perkins would officially receive its name from its master machinist, Mr. Thatcher Perkins, and the engine was also renumbered to 117. The engine would go on to appear in the 1950 film Rock Island Trail and the 1957 film Raintree County. In 2003, Baltimore was hit with a 27-inch snowstorm, and the shed roof of the B&O Museum collapsed, damaging the engine severely. In 2010, the engine was restored and was finally returned to the B&O Museum. Now let's move to the in-game model. The in-game model consists of 4 carriages and caboose, and the engine sports an old dilapidated paint scheme. This likely being done to hide the fact that every other train in the game was basically the same model. But overall, the engine's shape does bear a strong resemblance to the Thatcher Perkins. However, this model isn't lacking in any sort of inaccuracies. The front truck on the locomotive is a Beffendorf front truck. The Beffendorf truck was not invented until the late 1930s and therefore it is very inaccurate. However, this was likely Rockstar recycling all the bogies from all of the rolling stock in the game, so Rockstar probably did not mean to do any of this. Whilst the tender does look like it's based off the Thatcher Perkins tender, it does bear a very small resemblance to the Thatcher Perkins tender. Or who knows, maybe I'm just being nitpicky. Originally, Rockstar was planning to use Canadian National No. 3254's whistle for the locomotive. But this was later changed to South Simcoe Railroad No. 136's whistle in the final version of the game. In Red Dead 2, the engine will receive massive upgrades from its original, including a larger variety of paint schemes, with a few aesthetic changes. The smokestack of the engine was actually based off multiple smokestacks the Sierra Railroad No. 3 had worn during various movies she had filmed. In Chapter 1, the engine had a blue and brass livery and a K36 tender. The K36s were a series of narrow-gauge engines built in 1925, which is not at all accurate, seeing as the Thatcher Perkins is standard gauge and the K36s were narrow gauge. But I'll get back to this narrow gauge thing in a minute. The engine is most often seen in a green livery with brown cab and red wheels, and it retains its original tender. Once again, the whistle was changed to Rio Grande No. 484's whistle, with a slightly lower pitch. I'll mention it here, but the bell of the locomotive is from Strasburg Railroad No. 90. Now let's move on to the second train of Red Dead Redemption 2. The second train in Red Dead Redemption 2 is based off New York Central No. 999. In 1899, the New York Central was in heavy competition with its rival railroad, the Pennsylvania Railroad. In 1893, the New York Central would commission the West Albany Locomotive Works to build them a new express engine. And the Locomotive Works would produce this, New York Central number 999. The engine was fitted with 86-inch driving wheels, the largest driving wheels to ever be put on a steam locomotive. On May 10, 1893, the New York Central number 999 would pull the famous Empire State Express from New York to Chicago, going an alleged 112 miles an hour. I say allegedly, as the only way of tracking the engine's speed that they had was stopwatch timings between mile markers, so some people have debated that it was probably something like 81 or 86 miles an hour. But whoever's side of the 100-mile-an-hour debate you are on, this would cement the engine's history forever. The engine would continue pulling the Empire State Express for 20 more years. However, 999 wasn't without its faults. Its large 86-inch driving wheels often caused the engine to wheel slip when pulling heavier trains. Sometime in the 1910s, the New York Central would have the engine's driving wheels shortened to 70 inches, this way to prevent the locomotive from slipping as often. In 1930, the engine was renumbered to 1086 and would also receive a new tender and boiler. In 1927, the engine would officially gain its original number back, and would also travel the world for multiple years, appearing in multiple fairs. In 1962, the engine was given to the Chicago Museum of Science and Industries, which is where the engine still is to this day. Now let's get back to the in-game model. The in-game model's first appearance would be in Chapter 6, Beaver Hollow. Unlike the 460, the 440 didn't have a lot of changes from its real-life basis, and didn't have that many paint schemes either. The 440 only had a blue and green paint scheme, which is kinda strange why the 460 outnumbers it 4-2. So why didn't they just give one of the paint schemes to the 440? It just makes no sense to have the engine in the same. Why is it outnumbered? It doesn't. The whistle of the locomotive is the exact same whistle from the 460. I didn't put this in the script, and I'm actually going off script right here, but I've always questioned this for a while. Why does the 440 have that large gap in the front of the cowcatcher, like it was supposed to have a knuckle coupler at the front? Like, why does it have that at the front, and they just put the Lincoln pin on top of it and just ignore the fact that the gap is there? Now let's move to the rolling stock in-game. The rolling stock in-game is largely fictitious, but does share somewhat of a basis with most real-life 1860s rolling stock. Most people assume that most of the rolling stock in-game is based off narrow-gauge rolling stock, which could be correct. The whistle's from a narrow-gauge engine, tender's from a narrow-gauge engine. Obviously, the rolling stock are from narrow-gauge as well, right? Except for some of them. Like, what the hell is that one? Is that supposed to be like a cattle car? Why does it have like no roof? That paint scheme is a complete eyesore. I'm glad it's stuck in Saint-Denis. Why does this car have like 6 doors? Why does it need 6 doors? That one actually looks kind of cute. I like how short he is. I'm just realizing now that I didn't put the hand car in here, but I'll just quickly try to go over it. This is the hand car. Hand car was built somewhere in the 1860s, and they were used for track maintenance. That's just kind of about it. In game, I believe there's about 3 locations where you can pick up a hand car. You can drive it into a locomotive, which is what I see most people do. Now let's move on to our final mode of transportation, the Saint-Denis trolley. The Saint-Denis trolley is kind of hard to pinpoint some sort of basis to, but I'm just going to assume most of them are based off the New Orleans streetcars, seeing as the city is based off New Orleans anyways. The New Orleans trolley was first developed in 1835 and would become one of the oldest trolley networks in the United States. The St. Charles line would be the first line to open up and was ran by steam-powered trolleys. However, these proved to be rather noisy, and they were replaced with horses. There were numerous attempts to replace the horses with something else, like ammonia-powered engines, steam donkeys, and even... Wait, steam donkeys? Those are used for lifting logs. That's a logging machine. Why did they attempt to use the electric-powered batteries? However, it wouldn't be until the year 1893 that they would find a permanent solution. Overhead cables would attach to the top half of the trolley and provide it with electricity. In the year 1953, buses would start to replace the trolley system, and every single line along the New Orleans network would close down, except the St. Charles line. Many people felt like the St. Charles line was too historically significant to be pulled apart, and as a result, the line stayed up. And to this day, the St. Charles line is still in operation. Like the rolling stock, I feel like the trolley is somewhat fictitious. It's somewhat boxy and somewhat wide, so I have a feeling this was probably just done for player convenience. Like the 440, this one only has 2 different paint schemes. However, this is the streetcar. I can kind of see why it doesn't have multiple paint schemes. So this one I'll give a pass on. Another thing I failed to mention in the previous video is that the signals in Red Dead are not at all accurate. All of them point in weird directions, and they're only around Cornwall's work facility. And they're based off British signals? For reference, this is a semaphore, the signal that they likely should have used if they were going to use signals in this game. But it's kind of weird, like they have like approach signals and I think diversion signals, and it's just really strange. The signals are not at all right in Red Dead Redemption. And what, were they installing the signals and they were just like, screw it, my day's done, I'm going home.
Good night, everybody.
Hopefully you guys all enjoyed this remaster. Thank you all for watching, and don't look at the original.